Claus for Grilla. Test and then get ready. So we can start. Yeah, we can get started. Yeah. So do I need a name?
Yeah. Don't need to do that.
Yes. So now we're live. Right. Okay. We're recording this. We're recording this. All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. I'm sure Ryan will be here any minute. And he's here. And we'll start the board work study session. Okay, I guess I'll take it away. Well, good evening, everybody. Yay, we made it. So last year, our Joint Labor Management Advisory Council came together, and as a reminder, the Joint Labor Management Council is a committee that's made up of administrators, classified and certificated staff. I'm going to introduce you to the group in just a minute. A couple of them are here tonight. Who come together to collectively look at solving some problem in education that's a little complex and doesn't have a yes or no answer. And so we're working together on something that we're faced with. And so this year or last year, we chose this idea of drafting or recommending an educational equity policy or some parts of an educational equity policy for you all to consider and give feedback on tonight and then consider later on. So the Joint Labor Management Advisory Council uses an interest-based problem-solving process. So we stay pretty true to it. If you're not a process person, it can be long and hard because we stay true to the principled process. But I want to introduce the people that were on this committee. So we had Evangeline. We do have Melissa May here. She's here in audience tonight. Tanisha appears, a teacher at MMS. Allison Gray. Erin is also here. Erin Hammer was on this committee. Carrie Ramirez, Teresa Molinelli, Yonit, Dr. Jennifer Bolt. Now in services. Kim with MTA, Mariah Flanagan, Chris, who was a principal at the time, now business, Heather McAllister, who was a sub at the time, now she's a teacher, Jenna, Jessica Hernandez, and then also Debbie Petty was on the committee. So, and myself, I facilitated. So we came together, I believe it was 4 sessions last year and another session to wrap it up this fall, to kind of finalize what we're bringing forward to you today. All right. So as I said just a moment ago, we are coming together to talk about a complex problem in public education that we want to approach. And so we start our process with really kind of getting clear on what problem are we trying to solve. And that's where we start. And so the problem that we're trying to solve, this is sort of our statements that we say in our strategic plan as a district. We have a shared vision for every student to experience a high quality education through challenging content and personalized support that prepares them to thrive academically while fostering connection and community. That was a joint, we came together as a community, 2 years ago. This is our new vision statement. And the problem that we're trying to solve is that we have yet to realize this vision. Outcomes for our students on quantitative data, qualitative data show significant gaps in not only achievement, but perceptions about school experience. We envision a district where student outcomes are not predetermined by one's race or culture or poverty or ability or language or zip code, identity, or circumstance. And so you probably know that in student outcome data, achievement data, oftentimes we'll look at a poverty level and you can kind of make predictions about maybe where a district might be or where a district might go. And what we're here to say is that it doesn't have to be that way. That school districts and schools can change the trajectory for students regardless of circumstance. There's actually a new study that just came out of Stanford this year, where they control for factors such as poverty, parent, educational attainment, neighborhood, all kinds of factors. And they showed that students who are in higher performing schools that have a lot of focus on student achievement, their brain actually develops faster than students in other schools. So controlling for poverty, controlling for all these other characteristics, the brain can develop. And so it's just another study on top of mountains of studies that tell us that we can control what happens in our schools, in our district. We just have to pay attention to it and be diligent about it. Jerry Weiss is a former superintendent in Montgomery County Public Schools. He calls them trajectory benders. So he calls the strategies that he puts in place, they change the trajectory of the outcomes for students. So it might be that poverty is correlated with outcome, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so that's what we're really trying to solve here in Moreland and really in public education in general. So the process we use is a long one. And we start by really understanding the problem and describing and defining the issues. We read articles, we do a lot of talking, we're looking at videos, we're doing all kinds of stuff. We're looking at our own data to really just try to understand and identify what shared interests we might have in trying to come to this problem collectively. And then we kind of talk about, in a true interest-based process, you would start talking about options or strategies that might get you to help you meet your goals. You use a collaborative process to reach agreement as a Joint Labor Management Advisory Council. And then you together refine, you evaluate the strategies or the documents, and then we kind of put things down in what we call a straw document. You guys have probably heard me talk about the straw document before, but we will come back to it in a moment. So we use this process pretty much with fidelity. Ellen Holmes, I thought, is this the right one? Okay, all right, I don't have that one. Let's see how this goes. I don't have that slide, but I know this slide. So Ellen Holmes, who is a mentor of mine, is the one that taught me about using an interest-based strategy, whether it's in bargaining or some other problem-solving process, that it relies on a series of steps that are principled, PLED, right? You commit to a certain set of behaviors as a group, and we are looking to seek good solutions, not just agreement. And that ultimately this process improves relationships between all the parties. And it's not just about the outcome that we achieve, but about the process the process is also the goal. So we use consensus for decision making. We don't take votes. It's not certificated versus administrators versus classified, if you will. We're all one group. And we make decisions based on having conversations, listening to each other's point of view. And in the end, consensus means that we agree to live with and support the final decision. So we go with the will of the group. And so we use this protocol. Some people might do a thumbs up, sideways or down, but this time we used green, yellow, and red cards because it just makes it easier to count. So anytime we're talking about a strategy or an option or something we want to consider or a paragraph that we think is really important, we'll use this consensus protocol. Up is like, yes, absolutely, this or green adequately meets all the interests that we've been talking about. If I'm a yellow or a sideways, it's like, okay, I think it's okay, it might work, it meets most of our interests. I can live with the decision or like with the will of the group. But if I am a red card or a down, I, as an individual, do not think that this option meets our interests. And I want to discuss it. So you don't just get to have a red card or a thumbs down. You actually are then responsible for putting your concerns on the table, and we talk about them as a group until everybody can get to green and yellow. So nobody can be at a thumbs down or a red card for anything to move forward. So everything that you see tonight in our document has been kind of vetted by the will of the group. And it's a whole, and it represents all of our thinking, not just certain individuals. So that's right. I just changed my PowerPoint and then I changed it again. So I know what I'm doing. So defining educational equity. So when we're working towards equity, I think it's really important that we are talking about that the end result isn't like a place, it's a working towards. It's always a work in progress. And so we are saying that working towards equity means ensuring high quality outcomes for all students, that we're removing the predictability of success or failure that currently correlates with any other social factor, right? So I talked about poverty being a factor. We do not want the outcomes of students to be able to predict them based on that. And then we want to interrupt and dismantle any practices or structures and policies that create barriers to this access and success. So an example, over time, our English language learner policies in California have gone anywhere from we separate kids into a different school to we separate them into a different classroom to we don't separate at all and we're just all and you're just an English language learner, but there's nothing special that we do, to current law and policy which says no, actually they can't be in a room by themselves, they can't be in a different school, they're in the general education classroom, but you have to implement targeted language development or instruction, whether it's designated or targeted, and that happens inside the classroom, and that's current law. So that would be an example of how policy has changed over time, that creates more access and success for our English language learners. And there's a lot of research behind that. And then certainly we want to discover and cultivate the unique gifts, talents, and interests of our students. So we want to look at our students through an asset oriented lens instead of what they don't have, what they do have. Thinking about like our students are multilingual learners, so they speak more than one language, that's a gift, right? So not thinking about it as a deficit.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, of course.
So especially in the first part, philosophically, obviously, 100% supportive of that. What I'm trying to kind of understand is the factors that you mentioned. When you say removing the predictability of success or failure, I don't think you're saying we ignore that. But those things like poverty actually does have an impact. English learning or English speaking capability does have an impact in classroom, right?
Yes.
So I'm trying to kind of understand when you say removing the predictability of success, what does that look like?
So we're not saying it doesn't have an impact, because it always is going to have an
Yes.
impact, but schools can actually overcome for poverty, for other situation in students' lives.
Okay.
There's proven research that says the way you design a school, the way you design a classroom, the way you design a district can change that trajectory or that predictability, if you will. Any other questions?
So I think I'm interested in this part or this conversation when you have people that are really on opposite sides of question or conversation. What's the actual conversation like in this case about where's the division for people in this?
I
I
think
can understand the approach can be different, but
yeah.
is there actually a meaningful disconnect?
There
you know
is.
about?
There is, and I think it's on the next slide. So when you think about equality versus equity, and I think this is where the tension is, it's kind of people think of it as a zero-sum game, right? Like there's winners and there's losers. But the reality is, we in this illustration, we want all of our students to be able to have access to watching the game. Being able to see it, being part of it, think of it as curriculum, think of it as grade level expectations, think of it as whatever you want to think of it as. This is just, an analogy, is the sports game. If you give everybody the exact same thing, well, some kids already can see over the fence. Some kids, that one step work and then you see the child in the wheelchair, like that step, they can't even get on that step with the wheelchair because that's not the right and appropriate support for them. So, what we're talking about on the other side of the picture is this idea of equity, whereas like some kids can access the general ed curriculum, the rigor, the standards. They walk into the classroom, they're kind of like, there's already some preparation. Some kids will need some more supports and some kids will need accommodations, right? I think where the tension is that people think that if you're giving something to somebody else's kid, you're taking it away from my kid, right? And the other tension is, well, if all kids can't see over the fence, then we just won't have the game. We'll just cancel the game, which is not equity. And you actually hear that a lot in education, like, well, if all kids can't have this, that, or the other in all schools exactly the same, we just won't do it. So I think there's tension in that because it just takes, so then we have to get creative about, well, equity doesn't mean everybody gets the exact same thing, but equity means that some kids, some schools, some groups of students will need something different than another group of students. And so I think you have to talk about it in that way. And also parents who might have kids that are on the high end of the spectrum, like it's also equity when the kids that are, let's just say a third grade student, leave the classroom a year smarter, fourth grade level, when they leave the classroom, and that the students aren't being held back from their own learning, right? And so true equity would mean all kids are moving forward at least a grade, and then students who need more acceleration, need more support, we're giving it to them so that they can get to that fourth grade level as well. Will every kid get to the fourth grade level by the fourth grade? No, that is our hope, that is our wish, that's our goal. But I think too often in what I've seen is people talk about it as winners and losers. Or there's one pot of money and you're not gonna get as much and you're gonna get more. But I think that's a sort of a black and white, very limited view of what we're trying to achieve. And so I think if you talk about it in a way where kids get what they need in order to access a high quality public education, then it can help diffuse some of that tension. And that means on our part, we also have to talk about what we're doing for kids at the high end of the spectrum. What opportunities do they have? So I think a lot of times when we're giving our presentations, you hear a lot about our subgroups. And we focus on our subgroups because they're not performing where we want them to perform. But we have to have, the conversation has to be much more colorful than that, so that people get a true picture of all the things that we're doing in school to support all students. There are people that will disagree with me on that, but
I mean,
that's,
it's not a question of disagreement. I think I'll be really curious about seeing how that does work out. And obviously, I think the next set of slides will talk about it. Because from a practical standpoint, it is a limited pot of money, right? So that's why I'm more curious, and I'll hold my questions till we get there, because I
Okay.
think it'll be interesting to see how it looks, in practical implications.
So you guys have heard me talk about the opportunity myth before. And this is a study that came out of the New Teachers Project, where they studied 5 school districts. 250 teachers were part of the study. They looked at 1,000 hours of lessons, 5,000 assignments were reviewed, 25,000 pieces of student work, and 30,000 real-time student surveys. So this is a very big study across different kinds of school districts. And what the study found was that there are 4 key resources in a school, or trajectory benders, if you will, that when present can make up for some of these out of school factors that we've been talking about. So students, every student in the classroom having consistent opportunities to work on grade level assignments. We've been working on this as a leadership team. Strong instruction that lets the students do most of the thinking. So the teacher isn't just doing all the talking, but the students are talking to one another. The students are, the next one, deeply engaged in what they're learning. So there's some relevance, right? Like if all we're reading is books with talking animals, and that's my curriculum for my fiction for the year, like maybe that was relevant once upon a time, but so much more is happening in our kids' lives than talking animals. Think Charlotte's Web. It's a great book. there's lots of books about talking animals. There's lots of other kinds of books we could be reading in different grade levels. And then the fourth one is teachers who hold high expectations for students and believe they can meet grade level standards. So number 4 is probably where it starts, because if you have high expectations and you believe that they can meet grade level standards, you will obviously assign and plan for grade level content for all of your students. There may be some scaffolds built in. That's where our small group instruction comes in, because I might have to do something different in my small group instruction than I'm doing in the whole class. I might have accommodations for certain students who need more frequent breaks, or need more time on an assignment. And so just to give you just a couple examples of how that would play out in a school. But here's what they found, and I think it's really important, and I wish everyone in the world knew this. So students who had teachers with high expectations gained more than 4 additional months of learning in one school year. Now, remember, this is a 5-district study. 250 teachers, 1,000 hours of lessons observed, etc. And for students that started behind grade level, so they were low, they were behind, and they were given access to grade level content and assignments, they made 7 months more of learning in one school year compared to peers that experienced more of a remediation approach. Like, I pull you out and I'm, just focus on remedial filling in the gaps of the things that you don't have. That is a really important study, and it's a really important finding, and it's counterintuitive for a lot of educators, because we think that if I've got a 6th grader who still hasn't mastered 3rd grade skills, I'm gonna pull them out and just work on those 3rd grade skills, those 4th grade skills, but then they never get access to the 6th grade content and 6th grade skills. So then they just continue to fall further and further behind. And so the study is really powerful, because it's a kind of like a calling for teachers to be like this is where it's at. If you want to make gains for students, give your students grade level assignments, have high expectations, make sure that the materials are relevant and engaging, and you're going to see gains that like you've never seen before. And that's what I love about this study, is this isn't about a zero-sum game. This is not about taking from some and giving to some others. We have the structures in Moreland to be able to do this. We all do small group instruction in every school, even in our middle schools. So being able to lean into that as an equity structure, if you will, is a really important. And we've been working with principals to kind of hone in on what are the assignments that kids are getting, what is the level of work that students are assigned inside of that independent work time. Do they have access?
Just to clarify, in the second bullet point, we're saying not only do those students who are starting behind in that particular grade level, so it's a more than what they currently get, right? It's like, don't just let them catch up, but if you expose them to the current grade level, even though they may not be there yet, that itself is a strong enough pull that it'll well,
Yes.
Is that the right
Yes.
way to think about it?
Yes, you
Okay.
do have to have, do you guys, when I say scaffolds, do you know what that means? Like, you have to scaffold in a small group, like I
Yes.
give a whole group lesson on the math concept of the day in 8th grade. Like, you do that, you expose them to the content, you expose them to the lesson and how you solve it, and then you pull in a small group and you are giving some extra support and some extra structure so that they can understand the concept. Now, in a double dose, there may be an intervention time where they are pulled out or they are getting some of those holes filled, but you can't just do one without the other. And a lot of times in schools, you will see kids being pulled out without getting the grade level content or access to it. So it's an and both. You have to expose them to it, and then also there's some support that needs to happen. And so that, going back to that picture of the fence, and some kids are going to be able to access that 8th grade math content without additional supports. They still need to be engaged, it still needs to be relevant, it still needs to be strong instruction. But then there are other kids that will need supports and others that will need a different kind of support.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about. It just doing those things alone would have a massive impact on the outcomes for our students. Other question?
I have a question, but
You know,
no, I don't know that it's, appropriate, so I'm curious, like, so I read those four, if I go back a slide, I go, that to me, sounds fantastic. Like if you said this was our company policy, I actually would go, I agree with that. Why does it then have to be crafted into a larger policy that tries to shape, why are those four not enough? I guess is my,
Well, I mean, that is a good question, but I think when you look at our draft, you're gonna see this in there.
but layered in, like I have to find it.
Maybe, I actually think that might be a paragraph, because it came from the same study, I think we put that in one paragraph. There's 5 paragraphs, actually, in addition to the introduction, but, so I understand what you're saying, like, can we just do that? But there's some other things we can do too, and that's what the group talked about. So I'm just gonna show you this messy Post-its, and you can see you've got Post-its in front of you, so you're not gonna use the Post-its yet. But when we did all kinds of learning and talking and watching videos and discussing articles, we were picking out really salient points or concepts from articles and other readings and our discussions that we felt we needed to capture and were really important. And the group didn't know what we were going to do with all those Post-its, and I think it gave Aaron a heart attack when there were like 500 Post-its. And Jen was like, I don't know what you're gonna do with these, but I'm gonna sure watch you, I'm gonna see what you do. So what we did is we started to group the Post-its in like themes or buckets, right? So like when we had these conversations and we wrote things on Post-its and there were concepts that we thought were really important and spoke to us, we started to group them in like. And at the end of the day, we ended up having like 5 groups, 5 kind of themes. And you'll see in the BRIC document, there are 5 kind of concepts or strategies or buckets, if you will, that we are recommending go into a policy. So all of that learning went into what we call a straw document. Now, a straw document is a draft, but in an interest-based bargaining or an interest-based problem solving, it's kind of a loose draft. And we call it a straw because just like the 3 little pigs, you could like blow it over and it could kind of fall apart because it's got some thinking, but it's not like solidified. The straw would address our interests. The strategies would, that we're considering would meet those interests. It helps us put our ideas to paper to make sure that the whole group agrees on the concept. And it's not owned by any individual, it's a group document, and we've all kind of worked together on this. And it doesn't mean that everybody got exactly what they wanted in terms of wording, but it means that, remember that yellow card, it's like, I can agree enough sideways that I'm gonna go with the will of the group on this, and that it does meet our interests. That's what ends up being in a straw document.
I was trying to kind of find a point in the conversation to have this question. I guess this is a point. Talk a couple times about interests and stakeholders and making sure that people's ideas were represented. Again, given that this is a kind of going back to the title, it is a joint labor management advisory council. But a key stakeholder are the parents, right? How did you guys take their feedback or?
We did
Point.
not get feedback from families. We didn't do a survey. We've got surveys from the LCAP. We've got surveys from the strategic plan where we have input from families about what's important to them. But we didn't, for this project, we did not go out and do a special survey talking about equity because there are a lot of misconceptions about what it is, and we didn't want to cause a firestorm of cause and concern. But it is also true that this document does not represent parent voice. It represents educator voice. That's why we're bringing it to you in the form of a work study session, because there's more work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
But that's a really good point.
Yeah, because I'm thinking in terms of like, if we take a look at interested parties, that is very interesting,
Key stakeholder,
right?
a
I
key
mean,
stakeholder,
and
and you guys are closer to that than, some of us are. So like your voice really does matter in this because you are representing.
Yeah, that's fair.
you are representing
Yeah.
outside stakeholders. This was definitely internally focused. Once we had a straw document, which you don't have in front of you because we progressed, we looked at 5 sample policies from across, different areas. So you have a stack of very colorful paper. If anyone wants to grab their own stack, they may. But the yellow is the actual CSBA sample policy, like the model policy that CSBA says, you could just adopt this, right? This could be your policy for the trustees, and it meets, it's compliant, it's their recommendations. Which we could do and we could have done, but I felt it was more important for us to come together as a stakeholder group, with educators, to give some more voice to it, so we're not just taking something off the shelf, because I feel like there will be ownership over what we do in the end. The salmon colored one comes from the Alameda Unified School District. This is their board policy. You will see parts of the CSBA policy in it, not all. They've added, so they probably went through some process to get to what's in the salmon policy. The one is a policy from the Marysville School District. It's quite long, it's quite lengthy. I actually know they spent like 2 years on this. We actually, as a group, found this was a really hard one to read, and it didn't really feel like a policy, kind of felt like a different kind of a mandate, if you will.
And just to remind us, Marysville's in.
It's in Washington. It's on, they're located on the Native American tribe, the Tulalip Native American tribe, so it's not all Native students, but it's a mixture, and there's a lot of tension in the community, and so this was a group effort, and this was their final product.
Thank you.
And then,
Was this also done in a similar like collaborative effort? Yeah, okay.
yes. We did more Post-its. The blue is Central School District. I don't actually know where the Central School District is from. I don't know if it's in California. I don't know. I found it. It's another school district. It was hard to find these policies online, so it just was another sample. And then the pink is a sample from the University of Pennsylvania School of Education. So again, just a sample of educational equity policies. And what we did was because there are 5 policies, we got into 5 small groups. And so each group became an expert, if you will, in the policy, that they had, and we did a jigsaw. And so as a small group, we said, in what ways does this policy embody aspects that would align with our straw document, right? So kind of like compare, if you're the pink group, kind of look through it. And then are there aspects of this policy that are missing from our straw document and need to be included? And so we did a Post-it activity, blue Post-its. We wrote the things that would definitely align. Orange was the things that definitely need to be included or things that were missing. And then what we did is we took all of that feedback and we turned our document into a more solid document, which is what we call a brick document. So again, it's not final draft, it's not the final policy. It doesn't even really look like a policy all the way. It's starting to shape up like a policy, but we're bringing you that today in this form of a brick document, which you have in your folder, in the white paper. And this document has an introductory or philosophical kind of statement at the beginning, like all of the policies kind of had some version of this in them. So we thought that was important. And all of the policies made some commitments, some version of commitments, goals or strategies, and we like that word commitment. And so what you see here are 5 paragraphs, essentially 5 strategies that we commit to, should you go in this direction as a district, to help us get closer to educational equity. Doesn't mean we're going to achieve it all the way, but to help us get closer. And so I'll just walk you through them, and we're going to have some time to dive in and use your Post-its, but just give me a minute to kind of walk you through it all. So the first is that paragraph, creating the conditions where all students have an equal opportunity to learn. And I believe this is the paragraph, Brian, where you were kind of talking about uh, those four things from the four key resources. We could strengthen it. That could be your feedback. You may like this paragraph, you may not like the paragraph, but it was trying to get at that concept of the key resources and everyone having an equal opportunity to learn. The next one is implementing culturally responsive curriculum and pedagogy. So our students need to see themselves reflected in the classroom, whether it's the instruction materials or do we plan lessons so that they are kind of working through students' different learning styles, right? Like kids approach learning in different ways. And so how do we design our lessons so that they are more responsive to the students that we have in our classrooms? The third is to create a welcoming environment where all students have a strong sense of belonging. This is very consistent with what's in our strategic plan. The group felt that offering professional development to our educators was really important for ongoing self-reflection. And then 5 was addressing inequitable structures and practices within our school system that create barriers and access to success. So what you'll see in here is we're not naming the how and we're not naming specific actions because at the policy level, you guys are really outlining the what. What's our North Star? What is it that we believe? What's our philosophy? What are our commitments as a school district? Obviously, a next step would be to really kind of think about, what's the how? And I did talk about some of those things here tonight. So here's what I want you to do for the next, good 15 minutes is you've got some pink Post-its and blue Post-its. And you're just going to take this brick document and you're going to read through each section. So there's the 6 sections when you include the philosophy. And if there are wording or phrases that really resonate with you, I'd like you to write those down on your pink Post-it. You're just doing this individually, and then we'll have a discussion. And if there are wording or phrases that aren't clear, or wording or phrases that you feel are missing, or just really think maybe are a lightning rod that we need to consider, I want you to put that on blue Post-its. And so you're just going to take the next 15 minutes individually to read this 2-page document and put some thoughts down on pink and blue Post-its. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, so work study section. I'm gonna make it work. My Post-its.
It's not a gender reveal.
No, it's not a general. I just happened to find,
Wow.
I needed, it was about supply. It was having a supply closet. Yeah. What could I turn and talk? They did this already. So, yeah. So. Do you have them? Okay, all right. If you're in the audience and you would like to try it yourself, now again, you're not giving us direct feedback, but if you'd just like to participate a little, I do have some. There you go. Anyone else? Do you like some?
I got, yeah.
You already did that. Can you do it? More? Yeah, okay. 8 or 9 more minutes. Let's take 90 more seconds for this one. This doesn't have to be the last moment that you give feedback. We can work on this and we can take our time to work on this. Um, so just in order to start a discussion, what I'm gonna be doing is taking notes on your warm and cool feedback, for things to think about in maybe a next iteration of, building out an educational equity policy. So why don't we just start with some of the pink and the warm feedback wording or phrases that resonate to you, and just popcorn around, and I'll write as you talk. Okay. You have to go first. Shelley.
Like the student that's been right across the teacher. Wait, not kidding. Yeah, so. Just in the philosophy section, I just like and highlighted the challenging content and personalized support. I also love that we are really highlighting that diversity is integral, especially as the community and population of the school district and the community is changing. And also the idea of we want, I remember, I think it's in the last paragraph where it says we want to ensure students have a passion for learning versus, I mean, academics is great, but I think really fostering the curiosity and I think that is really important for us. And then for the first commitment, just again, the word highest expectations regardless of their current circumstance. That was really caught my eye. The second one is in the second commitment, the charge that students see themselves in reflected in curriculum, and it's important, goes back to diversity and just personally I feel like reading authors that are from diverse backgrounds is really, really important. Allows, yeah, just that whole commitment I'm doing. And then the culturally responsive instructional practices, focusing on, we do like, yeah, I think that is also really big.
Let's start with warm and we'll go around.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, Ryan.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things I was thinking about was how maybe, I know you took from these other policies and kind of jigsawed it together. And I was thinking in my head, how is this document going to be different, and or what were some things that may stand out uniquely about our district that would be supportive of it. And one of the big things I always kind of get drawn to is the diversity. And so that resonates with me because I think that is a large component of our district, is a large amount of diversity, and how it is supported in terms of like how we want it to be culturally responsive and include that range of perspectives. I'd like to see, with the large variety and diversity that we have, how in the classroom we can achieve that when there's so much diversity. And I do see that in section 4 or point 4, which is professional development, which is the really trying to break down those preconceived notions of what we have and those habits that are that we're used to, and then breaking those down and building upon, how do we address the level of diversity that it stands in our district to make sure that all kids see themselves within it. So I do feel like those were very strong points in here, and that really did resonate with me. I wasn't sure if the order in which, these were placed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, meant anything. I just thought in my head that maybe 5 was one of the first things, was like, when I see it, I go, well, one of the first things you should address is what are the addressing inequitable structures, and then maybe putting that first.
Mhm.
But then again, that would be the unclear part. But
Oh, yeah.
that was just sort of.
So you use extra credit.
I did that extra credit. So, yeah, that was just it. That was-
Gonna have one in the class. Oh, he's gotta have one in the class. Thank you. True.
Yeah, sure, I'll, kind of keep it, short. From a pink card perspective, I think all 1, 3, and 5, I had, like, there's pieces of that that really resonated with me. One, on the first one, I really like the emphasis on the grade level expectations, because I think that's absolutely true. I have a corresponding blue card for that. We'll talk about that when we get to it. On the third one, for me, I think the third one's really, really important, because I think having a physically safe place creates a psychologically safe place. And I think when you create a home away from home, kind of creates a place that allows for kiddos to go. So I think I like that call out. And then on the fourth one, the thing that resonated with me is that call out to raise overall awareness amongst everybody. And I think that awareness be raised across the board, not just for folks in the classroom, but also administrators. Even for myself as a board member, I have my own blind spots that I need to acknowledge. So I'd like that call.
Thank you.
There's wrote that. I don't know how I ended up with more blue cards.
You didn't, right? I don't think I have anything to add versus what's been said about people. I'm my natural contrarian, so
Just waiting for the.
so I want the blue card first.
So right,
Fine,
we
here,
skip.
fine, I can answer.
I got
So, I mean, I guess I look at this, I think, what are we doing differently than what we do today? So I mean, I can understand this policy to me drafted 50 years ago, trying to people to recognize inherent biases but I feel like so much work has been done. What is this policy now saying that we're gonna do differently, or are we just codifying why we do what we do?
I think, so I think it's a little bit of both. I think can create a rallying cry for our district, and it says that the board feels that this is important and that we should be moving in this direction. And I think it's important that the board make a statement, some sort of statement around it. There are lots of boards that are unwilling to even talk about and having an educational equity policy. That's why it was really hard to find that they're not like all over the place, or anything, they just stopped the CSBA one. So I think that it's a statement, it's a North Star, it's a rallying cry. It says this is what we believe in, this is what we're committed to. And then I think that we try some of these things, not all, and not in every school. And so to work towards educational equity means we're getting better and more precise, and we're talking about it, and we're using a common language, and we're like pushing ourselves to think outside the box. Like, yes, small group instruction, but then what happens inside that small group instruction? Or yes, high expectations, but what does that really mean? Right? How are we talking about it? So it's taking these concepts and then working with our educators to like understand them, talk through them, get smarter. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, much of it's been covered. I love the language that goes around inclusivity, fair, just. passion also stuck out to me. Um, I think there's always going to be work to be done around, everyone believing that all children are entitled and that they can succeed. And so that's what I really like about, a lot of the language that's.
Okay. Let's look at some of the cool feedback, or things that aren't clear, things that are missing for you, or it's just not like, just not connecting.
Okay. This might be just a small thing, but in the philosophy statement for paragraph 3, it said, all children are entitled to an education that is fair and just. Those two adjectives kind of bring more, like, I don't know, it felt kind of weird, felt more judicial versus, and just clarification or question around the reasoning for fair and just versus like comprehensive, rigorous, challenging, I don't know, just any other words that I would associate education with versus like fair education and just education. Just, question around that. And then, can I ask for statement number 5, just clarification about what was being discussed? What's the umbrella for number 5? What was being discussed for that commitment? Because when I'm reading it is it more? I think I'm having trouble kind of figuring out, is it more like on a DO side of things where it says like, regularly review expenditures and financial stuff? Is it more like school-based, like for example, like lunch, like free and that's.
Yes,
lunch
and.
Oh, yes.
But yes, and it's for
all of that.
for whatever your role is, to be thinking about, like, through an educational equity lens, and we've talked about this as cabinet, and we'll probably run a little bit over, but, I'll try to move as quickly, like, some of our policies around bus passes, or things that we've just always done in a certain way, always, but like, could we re-examine that and look at that from an equity standpoint, and might we have a different policy? And then at the school site, it might be, what are our discipline policies, or what are our, like, what's our intervention programs, right? Like, and really examining, does it kind of meet the philosophical sort of mandate, if you will?
Okay. Thank you. And my last one was, I know we're not really trying to dig deep into the house and the policy, but I do think, when you're reading a policy, you kind of do, your mind wanders there. And I saw that in the other board policy examples, there was like a commitment and then like a we will section. I'm not saying that we need to follow that, but I was just reading through the commitments, and the commitments like number 2, 3, and 5 have like a we will do blank, or administrators will do something, which I think made like supported the commitment a lot more while you're reading through it. Versus I think number 1 and 3 don't really have a we will do blank statement that really support. And I think it makes it, as a person, as I'm reading through it, I think it just solidifies, like, I know what are like simple steps that we can like hold ourselves accountable to, and make sure that these. Good feedback, thank you, Brian.
Really, it was just the order of the commitments that was specific. And it was kind of hard to, what Brian was saying was like, what did we have before, and how is this different from what we had before? And that's sort of like what I was thinking in my head, like, we're saying this, but I think you basically clarified that we're codifying, or we're really trying to say, now let's look into it, but I just didn't know what we had prior and how different this was. If I'm saying it's distinctly different or completely new.
We don't currently have.
We don't have a policy. Right, so like, that's the first thing, is we just don't have one. When we get into the how, then it's a longer conversation about, and what does it look like, and how are we doing this? Sure.
So I think for one, keep it super quick. I think one thing that I think it's important to at least acknowledge in the policy statement, or at least it does call, it is important to meet students where they are, et cetera, et cetera. I think one of the challenges is when you provide grade level expectations to folks, it could have one of two experiences. And I'm speaking from personal experience. It's like you could either accelerate somebody and they're pulled by that force and they move forward, or they hit it and they're like they continuously fall. And I've seen both. So how do we kind of make sure that it's like not falling behind? So that's the thing. On the second one, I think the language itself, again, I'm fully supportive of the language. It is just that in our, I'll say it as it is, in the current political environment that exists, it might cause some concern in terms of like, where do you draw the line for equity? How long does inclusion? I think we just need to be a little bit careful about that. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I think, especially when you say a word like, and experiences are validated. So it's like people get on the defensive. Typically, it's like, what do you mean? I have to validate.
Where is that? Where's that line?
It is important in the second
It's the
one.
last sentence.
It's the last sentence. It is important that our students' cultures and experiences are valid. It's like, you have to go on the defensive, it's like, you validate, what do I have to do? No, so just one thing.
Okay.
And then the last one, I'll keep it super quick, is, for me, when we talk about the last sentence again, there is regularly review expenditures and allocate financial and human resources in a manner that provides all students. I think it'd be important to see how that practically turns out, because at the end of the day, that pot is a limited pot. So if there are creative ways in which it is not a zero-sum game, I think we should just.
Brian?
I'll be quick as well. I think on the bottom paragraph, I give that as the opening. I think he says that we would eliminate the rules of success. I like the language a lot better about altering the arc of kids. I think it's, I don't think we can eliminate predictability. So I think we stumble over that word that we maybe altering the arc, I think is a really reasonable thing. And then the second piece for me that is different, I think the language around we can increase our awareness of historical injustices that have created barriers and led to is very specific. And I would question if it's helpful. But that's how I look for. You know, I get that the overall premise is to say we should examine our past and its beliefs about students, things that have created this unequal access to the church system. I think that language might be inflammatory, but that's just my perspective.
Heather? I like the content. I a couple of times had to read a sentence a couple of times because there's a lot of information in each of the sentences and I got lost in it. So maybe simplifying some of the structure, breaking it apart, just for ease of reading.
I know we're out of time, over time. So we can take more time on this. So this is, you know, we're not bringing anything in December to be approved or voted on. But I do think that this balance between inflammatory language, and being honest with our current state is really important, because you don't want inflammatory language, but you also don't want to not say something that is true in our world, and because we're worried about what somebody might think about that. And that I will continue to work on that, to like try to think about the right language, given that feedback. But this is our first conversation about this since you know what I mean? Like, it's a good conversation, and I think it's something for us to work toward. We might not be ready yet for, you know, to vote on a policy, but I think if we keep getting feedback and input and I refine it and have you take, you know, another look at it and give more feedback, that should be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's exciting that, you know, our for adding this to our football.
I
Absolutely.
100% support that. It's just like we have to find that.
The balance. And I do want to thank everybody that was on the team
Yeah.
for the thoughtful discussions that we had. They weren't easy discussions, because we don't all believe in the same exact thing, right? And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And so they did a wonderful job having very respectful, professional conversations and talking about hard things. And so I just want to give them one last round of applause and thank them. And I think that now we have to switch and go to another meeting up there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the trick of it is, I know. Probably should have spent 2 hours. So that was. It's good stuff.
It's a lot of information, so good to be able to digest, right?